people so focused on the things that matters to them, their priority, but they overlook the needs of others. Now, the first thing we noticed in the lesson last week was Jesus' faithfulness. In verse 1, it says, again, he showed up to the synagogue. Again, he went to the synagogue. Again, he went to church. See, Jesus was familiar to going to a place of worship. He was faithful in that. He always went. And Jesus is the one setting the example, so we too have to follow his lead. The scriptures tell us, but we should not forsake the assembly of each other. So we come together like Jesus again and again and again. Showing up is the first step. You know, when the Lord saved me, the Lord saved me for a reason, I used to go to a lot of parties and, during those days, when there was a good party going on, people would often say, well, who's coming? Who's going to be there? Who's going to be there? And you say, oh, David's going to be there. Oh, David's going to be there. I'm coming. If David's there, I'm coming. And that's how it was. That's how it should be at church. Who's going to be there? Who's going to be there? Oh, someone said, I'm coming. That's how it should be, We are faithful in coming, and showing up is the first step, because by showing up, you don't know how the Lord's going to use you. When people used to ask who's going to be there at those parties, the party wasn't in honor of that person. That person was just showing up. But because that person had a reputation, or because that person was the star of the show, or because that person was pretty, or whatever, everybody wanted to go. And so it is in church. That's how love should be for one another. Because you're here, I'm here. I told George today, but I feel at home when he's here. I love it when he comes, because we have matching shirts. I tell everyone, he's my twin brother. You see, just showing up is the first step, because you don't know how you're going to impact someone's life. You just show up. The second step, this is the second step. So not only we learn about Jesus' faithfulness to show up, to worship, we also learn about his faithfulness to minister. That's the second step. You see, you don't just come, you do something. You help out, you do something to contribute. So Jesus went into the temple, we learn, and he saw this man who had a deformed hand. So Jesus saw, but he didn't just saw, he was willing to do something. And everybody was watching him, because they was watching to see whether he's going to break the Sabbath law. And if he did, they would be able to accuse him of something. And even though everybody was watching him, Jesus was willing to stand up for what was right in the face of adversity. He knew if he healed this person, his life would be in jeopardy. And he was still willing to do it. That takes some courage. So it's important for us to see people, really see people, and see their need, and have a willing heart to do something about it, to help them out. Now, since Jesus' enemies was watching Jesus, Jesus used this as an opportunity to provoke them. And Jesus had done that time and time again. Jesus actually asked them in one of the Sabbath, he asked the Pharisees, have you not read? He's talking about David, what David did by eating the showbread. Have you not read what David did? That's like going to a professor and saying, did you not know? Or you go to an IT technician and say, don't you know how to plug in the computer? Did you not read? You're saying it to a learned person. Did you not know? How is it you don't know? You're Pharisee. Did you not read? They were mad, pretty mad. And now Jesus is challenging them again by saying to them, is it lawful on the Sabbath to do good or to do evil, to save or to kill? Because this question has to do with the law. These religious people are standing there, but they're being watched by everybody. So everybody's looking at these religious leaders, watching and listening to see what they're going to say, because it has to do with the law. You see, what they say, it tells you what's in their heart, and everybody's listening. So if these Pharisees had said, yes, it is right to do good on the Sabbath, then Jesus would have gone ahead and healed the man, but they would have lost the opportunity to accuse him and destroy him. But if they say exactly what was in their heart and say, no, it is right to do evil on the Sabbath and to kill, then they would have looked terrible. They would have looked like a monster in front of everybody, and nobody would want to follow them. So the scripture lets us know in verse 4 that they kept silent. And by being silent, what they're proving, what they're confirming is that Jesus had them over a barrel. They could not move. They had to just keep stum. They could not say anything. They could not do anything because they're being watched by everybody and they did not want to be condemned themselves. So we're going to pick up the story now in verse 5. It says, "And when he had looked around at them with anger and been grieved by the hardness of their hearts." Now this shows us the compassion and grief of Jesus. It's not very often we read about Jesus being angry in the scriptures, but here's one occasion. Jesus is angry, and usually when you read about Jesus being angry, he's usually angry about people being mistreated. He's usually angry about the hypocrisy and the hypocrisy of the Pharisees or the other religious leaders, like the scribes and the elders and the priests. He's often angry at those who's going to dishonor the things of his Father. And many people believe that being angry is wrong, but being angry is never wrong if you're angry over the things that you should be angry over, because there are times when we need to be angry. Anger is just an emotion. Ephesians 4, verse 26 says, "Be angry and do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your wrath." Do not let the sun go down on your wrath. Don't let your anger control you. Anger is not a sin, but it can lead to sinful thinking and sinful actions. And that's why we have to be careful where anger is concerned. However, anger can also lead to righteous actions and cause you to stand up and do the things what you need to do that is right. A young man came to my place of work when I was in England. And he came, and sometimes people are unfortunate, and some people can be so cruel, because you may join an organization and you just don't fit in. And then people take the mickey out of you, they make jokes out of you, they use you and abuse you and make you feel unwelcome, and then you leave. This one particular guy, he came and he was trying his best to fit in. I used to work in a footwear industry, and he's trying his best to fit in. And people were deliberately telling him to do things that were wrong to make him look bad and make him look silly. And one day, I called him aside and I said to him, and he had a temper, this guy. He knew how to get angry. And I knew one day it would go badly wrong because we have lots of tools and things in the company. And one day I called him over and I said, listen, don't worry about what they're saying. Just do what I say and you'll be all right. I took him under my wing and I told him, do this, do that, do this, do that. And eventually he did what I did, he did what I did. And then I would have him working beside me. And what I did, I told him, you have to become me. So you don't have to work exactly like me, but you have to become me. You have to think like I think. So what I did, I gave him one foot of the shoe, and I took the other foot of the shoe. And I did what I had to do the shoe, and he did what he had to do the shoe. And at the end of the day, we have to match them up, and you can't tell which is which. And that's usually hard, because you have to work how your colleague worked in order to achieve that. So we did that, and we put them together, match up the heels line up, the heels were the same, and so forth and so forth. Once I got into that stage, that was it. He was gone. Nobody could touch him again because he understood the principle, he knew what he's doing, and nobody could touch him again. But you see, with certain times, we come in and the anger gets the better of us. He was an angry man, and he was a big man, and I knew if he hit somebody, it would go badly wrong. So the anger, we have to control that anger. But by controlling the anger and directing it and channeling it to the good, we can bring God's glory, bring God some glory. So God expresses anger. And that's why we know that anger is not a sin, because God is holy. God himself expresses anger. In Exodus, interesting story, chapter 3, verse 18. God promised that the leaders of Israel would listen to Moses. Moses was a prophet. And God promised him that the people of Israel they would listen to him. God said they would heed your voice. They would listen and obey your voice. That's in Exodus chapter 3, verse 18. In Exodus chapter 4, verse 1, Moses makes this protest. He says, but suppose they will not believe me or listen to my voice. Now, when Moses used the word but, he might as well have said, but what if they think you're wrong, God? Once he used the word but, there was no need for that word but. Because of Moses' experience, what he had with God, because of the burning bush experience and the audible voice of God experience and that divine presence, the word but should not have been in Moses' vocabulary. But is that what we've become today? When God speaks to us, when God shows us, when God directs us, and we say, but. You know, when Moses was in the right place when he was showing no confidence in the flesh. I can't do it. But the moment he used the word but, he's showing no confidence in God. And that's where God uses anger right there. Has we become that? When God touches us and directs us and speaks to us, have you seen so-and-so? Have you seen so-and-so? Look at that. And we say, but. What if? If only. The word but is a conjunction. And it means on the contrary. It is used to indicate a contrast or the opposite of something within the sentence. Something that has just been said. Some element of the sentence is used to contradict it. And the way it's used is like this. You may say, he stumbled, but he didn't fall. One cannot but sympathize. You see what I mean? It brings in the contrast. If it's used as a preposition, you may be used like this. In Texas, we were never anything but poor. If it's used in a verb, it may be used like this. He is but a shadow of his former self. And if it's used in a noun, it might be like this. No buts, just do it. So the word but is used in a lot of different ways, but it's used to bring a contrast. When Moses used the word but, he's literally saying, God, what you just said is not right. God said they will heed your voice, and Moses says, but. That's where God got angry. Now, how many times we find ourselves in that same situation? I want us to understand that God wasn't angry at Moses falsely claiming that he was never eloquent. In Exodus chapter 4, verse 10, this is what Moses said. He said, then Moses said to the Lord, O my Lord, I am not eloquent, neither before nor since you have spoken to your servant, but I am slow of speech and slow of tongue. We're all like that. We all have our inadequacies. We're all short in some way or another. You know, I look pretty, but I'm not tall. So, you know, and by the way, guys, tall men are going out of fashion. It's the short guys what's carrying the swing, just to let you know. So we all have our problems. You know, Moses had his problems. But that wasn't the reason why God was angry with him. God was angry because his unwillingness. It's not that Moses couldn't, he wouldn't. He wouldn't. So he's not eloquent. It doesn't mean he can't. I'm not eloquent. I get my tongues tied up and so forth. But here we are. But. Exodus chapter 4, verse 14. This is what God expresses in his anger. He says, so the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses, and he said, is not Aaron the Levite your brother? I know that he can speak well. And look, he is also coming out to meet you. When he sees you, he will be glad in his heart. Now, there may be 1,000 reasons why Moses wasn't willing to act. He knew the plight of his people in Egypt, but he wasn't willing to. And there might be, many reasons why. And one of them could be because of past rejection. Pride is another one. How many times we've been asked to do something and we did it and we had our heads chewed off. And because of that, we won't do it again. So when I ask you guys to volunteer and get stuck in, put your hands to the plow, you're not willing to do so because you remember that past experience. It could have been the same with Moses. It could have been that we are asked to do things, but we don't want to do it because we don't fit the profile. We don't look the part. I was reminding someone this week, when I met my wife, I'm a pretty bold guy. I want you to know that. I may be short, but I'm like dynamite. When I met my wife, I made proposals to her. You know what she told me? She looked me straight in the eyes. And she says, I want to marry a tall, dark stranger. Now, I was a stranger because I was new in the land. Nobody knew me. I'm dark. I can do that. I'm handsome. I can do that. But a tall, no stretch of the imagination, I was going to be able to do that. So, the point I'm making, we all have our thing, our faults, our failures, our inhibitions. But it doesn't mean we can't do something. You do it, somehow you make it work. Moses wasn't even willing, and his people were trapped in Egypt, suffering. Basic truth is Moses wasn't willing to do anything. So what God did, God gave Moses Aaron. And I want you to understand what's taking place here. This is God chastising Moses for not believing in what he says. Because when we look at the scripture, we're thinking he's in agreement with Moses. And he's trying to build Moses up by giving him help, giving him a partner. That's not what's happening here. Aaron is 3 years older than Moses. He's Moses' elder brother. And he's the high priest. But he isn't God's spokesman. He is Moses' spokesman. God's spokesman is Moses. God speaks to Moses, and then Moses speaks to Aaron. And that's a big difference there. So God gives Moses Aaron as the thorn in his back. It's like stepping on someone's corn toe and hurting them. Every time Moses has to give excuse for his elder brother, who happens to be the high priest. Exodus chapter 32, verses 1 to 6. He tells us about Aaron building the golden calf, fashioning it with himself, and building the altar. Do you know how many people of Israel lost their lives because of that one man, Aaron? In Leviticus chapter 10, verse 1 to 7, it tells us about Aaron's sons, where they offer up the wrong fire to God and blaspheme God. And in Numbers chapter 12, 1 to 8, it tells us about Aaron leading a rebellion against his brother Moses with his sister Miriam. So you see, Aaron was a thorn in Moses' side. He caused a lot of trouble for Moses. So it wasn't that God was giving Moses help as it was. He was giving him a thorn. You won't listen to me? All right, have this. That was a lesson. And it's not as if Moses is going to slap him down. That's his older brother. So here we are. Oftentimes we are asked by the Lord, directed by the Lord to do something, but the word "but" come out. We doubt ourselves, we doubt God, and don't want to do it. Now God, he doesn't want the kind of person that is just smooth talking, eloquent, which is what he was saying about Aaron. No, he doesn't want just a person who can talk the talk. He wants the person that can walk the walk. He wants the person that can talk and lead. He wants to mix both office, the talker and the leader, and bring them into one. Most of the time, it's about what I want to do. But from God's perspective, it's not about what you want to do. It's about what you need to do to save souls. So God's going to move the two together, the talker and the leader. You've got to talk the talk, but you also have to walk the walk. Paul, in 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 1, Paul says, "And I, brethren, when I came to you, did not come with excellence of speech or of wisdom, declaring to you the testimony of God." Not even Paul had the excellence of speech or the wisdom of man to declare the testimony of God. Now, even all of us, we may not have that eloquence to be able to speak fluently about the testimony of God. We might not have that level of excellence, our degrees and so forth. We may not be that learned to talk about the testimonies of God. But we can act them through. We can show people by doing what we do, by just being kind, just being loving, just being caring, just showing that you care for others, being respectful. So people volunteer and they get it wrong. It doesn't mean you kick them out. You show them. Next time, instead of telling them, you show them. You bring them along. Church, this church is going to grow. Because we cannot go to a building that can occupy 820 and just have this. It ain't going to work. And I know the beauty in small churches because we're quite personal. We get to know everybody. I know all your names. You know me. I love you and you love me. But when we get to these big congregations, people get lost and people can drop out. People get sick and nobody notices it. People drop dead and nobody notices it. But we can't have a church like that. What we do here, we have to be able to do it on a bigger scale. And we can't go to a big building and keep it small because we can't be exclusive. Oh, you can come, but you can't. No, God's kingdom's open to all. So somehow, some way, we have to be able to see people, see their needs, and be willing to act. Bring them in, make them feel loved, make them feel part of it. When we get to Wellington, we have to be able to see and be willing to minister to their needs. In the same way Jesus ministered to this man's need, right there in the synagogue. Jesus showed controlled anger when he overturned the tables of the tax collectors in John chapter 2, verse 13 to 17. But uncontrolled anger can quickly lead to sin and dishonoring God. So Paul, he advised us, don't let the sun go down on your wrath. In other words, don't let anger sit unresolved. The focus is not on the literal sunset, as if there's a certain time when all anger and complaints have to be left and ignored. No, the focus is on don't let time go past without dealing with it. That's what Paul's saying. Our priorities has got to be with dealing with the anger. Acts chapter 10, verse 38 says, "And God anointed Jesus of Nazareth with the Holy Spirit and with power, who went about doing good and healing all who were oppressed by the devil, for God was with him." So Jesus was a man who went around doing good, always doing good. So there's no way Jesus is going to let this issue or any other issue go. When he sees, he's going to act. And he's the one who's setting the example. And that's the example what we're going to pick up. And that's the example what we're going to take to the new building. We're going to see and we're going to act. So the other thing, the fourth thing what we see and we notice here is Jesus' compassion. We see how his anger now turns to compassion. In verse 5, "And he said to the man, 'Stretch out your hand.' And he stretched it out and his hand was restored." It's almost as if Jesus was sending a message to the Pharisees. It's almost as if he's saying that you Pharisees, you only care about your rules and your laws. But look at this poor man here. And Jesus used this opportunity to provoke them because Jesus could have done this miracle the day after. He could have done it in private, but he's using it here. Why? Because everybody's watching. So he turns to the man and he tells the man to stretch out his hand. And you know, it's strange because according to the Sabbath laws, if you cut your finger, you could stop the bleeding, but you couldn't put ointment on it. You could stop it from getting worse, but you wasn't allowed to make it get better. And Jesus is using this opportunity to deliberately provoke them. And in so doing, Jesus commands the man to do something that is impossible, to move his paralyzed hand. Right there and then, the man could have thought within himself, what are you talking about, Jesus? My hand's paralyzed. Heal it first, and then I'll do what you're asking me to do. And that's reasonable, thinking that way. But then where's the trust? Where's the belief? Where's the faith? Jesus is asking this man to do something impossible. His hand's withered. He cannot move. And Jesus is telling him to stretch forth his hand. And as the man puts effort into it, God does the rest. God never commands us to do something without giving us the ability to achieve it. So when this building came, what we're going to, Wellington High School Theatre, we were told that it's going to cost us $10,000 to rent that building. And that's what an agent told us. So I said to my wife, no, I don't care what he says. You write that school. You write that school and tell them we need that building. So my wife wrote the school. We wrote to about 10, if I remember. 10, not just schools, 10 different places. And this was the first place that came back. And when they came back, they were willing. They were willing. But it wasn't for 10,000. It was for 4. Is that, am I correct, 4,000? Somewhere around that area. But it's affordable. Because the cost we're having for that building there is no less than what we're paying out each Sunday here. When we had Pastor Ryan here, it's the same cost. So we're not losing nothing. But as we grow, we will gain. So there's no way I could say no and take a smaller building when I have that kind of deal. So you see, just by doing, you see and you're willing to act, you never know what could happen. When we wanted to leave here, and we arranged to leave here, our lease is supposed to finish on the 26th. So we're expecting to pay money for the 26th. But we want to go before that. We want to break that lease. But we're going to finish 1 week early, but we still have to pay out for that. That's not good. So we thought about asking them to show grace to us. But it was said, no, they probably won't because so and so and so and so. Hey, you got nothing to lose, try. You never know. So we asked them, and they said, yeah, sure. So you see, you just never know. Just show up. That's the first step. Just show up. See and be willing to act. You don't know how the Lord's going to use you. So Jesus, he tells this man to stretch forth his hand, and he does something which is impossible. He puts the effort in, and God does the rest. And that's all I'm asking you to do. Just put the effort in and leave God to do the rest. You never know what's going to happen. Just try. Just trust the Lord. So we conclude the story in verse 6. It says, then the Pharisees went out and immediately plotted with the Herodians against him and how they might destroy him. Now they want to destroy Jesus because Jesus embarrassed them and everybody is looking. Now you would have thought, after seeing a miracle like that the Pharisees would have stopped and said, this guy's got something. This guy must be the Messiah. But no, you would have thought they would have stopped and at least praised God for the healing of this man. But no, instead they decide that they want to kill Jesus. The anger got even worse. In Luke chapter 6, verse 11, it says, but they were filled with rage and discussed with one another what they might do with Jesus. They were wild with rage. They lost control. They was mad as a hatter. Jesus, he pointed out their hypocrisy. He challenged them. He showed them where they were going wrong. He addressed their pride. And he addressed the hardness of their heart towards people and towards God's word. And there, the result of that was they're going to destroy him. You see, they couldn't walk it back. They showed themselves and presented themselves to be this machine, and there's no way they can walk it back because everybody's watching. The Herodians were there. They couldn't walk it back. How many times we say things and make public announcements things don't transpire the way we hope they would, but we're too embarrassed to walk it back. That's pride. But somehow, some way, by just saying, well, it's a fair cop. I was wrong. You was right. I'm sorry, I gave the wrong information. Just doing that, it builds us up. It doesn't push us down. It builds us up. It makes us look. What's the word I'm looking at? Make us look honorable in the eyes of others. But the Pharisees couldn't do this because everybody was watching. The Herodians were there. And they don't want to get on the wrong side of the Herodians. King Herod was a guy who killed John the Baptist, cut off his head. And John the Baptist was the greatest prophet born of a woman. So if this king can do this to the prophet, what would he do to them? The Herodians were watching, and the word would get back to the king. And Herod hated Jesus. Jesus called Herod a fox because he's a sly old fox. He's someone you can't trust. The Pharisees can't be seen as backing down to Jesus because Herod hates Jesus. And the Pharisees need the Herodians. They need King Herod. Now, King Herod, Herod the Great, he tried to kill Jesus shortly after his birth in Matthew chapter 2, verses 1 to 12. He knew that this was a new king on the site, and as far as he's concerned, there can only be one king in town. So he went around killing all the newborns to get rid of Jesus. Now, after he died, his kingdom was split into 4. And his son, Herod Antipas, ruled over Galilee and the nearby territories at the time when this story took place. So the Herodians' alliance with the Pharisees is interesting because they had nothing in common. So I don't understand fully why the Herodians and the Pharisees cling together, except for the one fact is the Herodians, or King Herod rather, had something that the Pharisees want. Now, the Pharisees, they concentrated on the Mosaic law in the hope that the Messiah would come and free them from Roman rule. And here they were in the synagogue looking at the Messiah and didn't even know it. And the Herodians, they have absolutely no formal connection to the temple or to religion. Their primary concern was their loyalty to the king and to Roman rule over Israel. So differences aside, you've got one which is mainly religious, and one is just the authority of the king and the rule over Israel. So you put the difference aside. The one thing what made the difference here is Herod the king had legal authority to execute a criminal. The Pharisees didn't. They didn't. And the Roman authorities were quite sensitive when it came to rumors about rebellions among the Jews. So all the Pharisee had to do was paint Jesus as a political threat, and the Herodians would have done the rest. This is how you get rid of Jesus. The Pharisees couldn't kill Jesus, but they knew who could. And the Herodians right there in the temple, in the synagogue, watching and listening. So their strategy was good, but it would take a long time for it to come to fruition. However, it transpired that Jesus did lose his life on the cross, but he gave it up. He gave it up for a bigger deal, a bigger thing. And he rose again victorious. And because he gave up his life and paid the penalty for all sin of mankind, he rose again. The scriptures let us know in Hebrews chapter 4, verse 9, that there remains therefore a rest for the people of God. Because he gave up his life, there is now rest that you can find in the Lord of the Sabbath. He is truly Lord, not only of the Sabbath, but of everything. So if you put your trust in this guy Jesus today, you can find peace and you can find rest. The whole emphasis of this story is that we cannot go about just seeing people's needs and turning around. I'm all right, Jack. And do things according to me because I'm whole, I'm safe. The idea is iron sharpeneth iron. The Bible lets us know that the church of God is built of lively stones knitted together. I need you as much as you need me. And that's why when I appeal to you and I ask you to get involved, get plugged in, put your hand to the plow, I'm talking about every single one. Because church, believe you or not, we're going to grow this church. And when we grow this church, I don't want one more burden upon the leadership team. Not one. They're not, because there is a thin line between you giving your all and you getting burnt out. Very thin line. You can give your all today, and by tomorrow you lost your salvation because you get burned out. You're tired. You know? I don't want one more burden on my leadership team, but we are going to grow. We have to grow because there's a whole world out there that needs Jesus. Everybody needs Jesus. It wasn't just this man need Jesus. The Pharisees needed Jesus. The Herodians needed. They all needed Jesus. They just weren't willing to admit it because everybody's watching. What I'm saying to you guys, whatever you have to do to bring your family in, bring your friends in, touch someone's life, big up someone, encourage someone, love on someone, whatever it is what you do. If you bake cakes and you bring cakes in, so be it. If you're a gardener and you've got fruits and bring in to bless someone, so be it. If you can bless someone by wearing a fancy shirt, thank you, by the way. If you can bless someone just wearing a fancy shirt, then you do it. You do whatever you do. Everybody can do something. We don't all have the same skills and ability, but everybody can do something. And in closing, I'm saying this, whether you be sick, lame, or lazy, you volunteer service, I'm going to use every one of you. Whether you had your head eaten up before or not, I'm going to use you.